Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar from the AT3 Reuse Community of Practice. Today's session is on revisiting AT reuse revenue models. And you might remember a couple of years ago, we touched on this topic, but certainly in light of COVID and post-COVID, or whatever we're calling it, it certainly is an important topic that we want to definitely revisit. Go ahead and move to the second slide. I just want to go over some reminders. This session is being captioned, so make sure that if you need to use the captioning, click on the CC button on the control panel. If you have any questions or comments, please enter those into the chat window and will be addressed along the way or at the conclusion of the session. Make sure that you keep a lookout at the AT3Center.net events page for upcoming events, webinars, and other events. And please complete the post-webinar survey that you'll get, just kind of letting us know about what you thought about the session and also about other topics dealing with reuse that you'd be interested in pursuing. So go ahead and jump to the next slide. I'm going to go ahead with that and just go ahead and turn it over to you, Carolyn Phillips.
Yay, thank you, Marty. And hello, everybody. It is so wonderful to see so many of you on, and I'm glad that you have joined us as we're talking about a topic that continues to evolve. You know, Liz and I have been doing this for years together. I absolutely love presenting with Liz, and it's great to see this conversation continuing to grow, especially during this time when I think a lot of people kept thinking, oh, you know, reuse is not going to be as important or what have you, and it continues to be not just relevant, but something that is thriving. And so looking forward to talking with all of you about that. So I am Carolyn Phillips. I am the director and principal investigator of our Tools for Life program here, and the co-director of the Center for Inclusive Design and Innovation. And I am, as I said, have been working in the field of reuse since 1996, when I started my first reuse project. And then, of course, Liz and I created with a lot of other folks, including the awesome Trish Redman, who is key to our success and with us today and helped create this presentation, the Pass It On Center. And so thanks to AT3 for continuing to letting us partner and continuing to be a part of this conversation and part of this technical assistance when it comes to AT reuse. And I'm going to turn it to Liz.
Hey everyone, I'm very happy to be here with you today. As Carolyn said, my name is Liz Prasad and I serve as the program and outreach manager for Tools for Life, which is Georgia's AT program. I'm very excited to be here with y'all and so glad that reuse is still part of the conversation. As Carolyn said, it definitely hits us personally in our life. I use a bunch of reused equipment. I will never forget a national meeting that we had. FODAC was in the room and Chris Brand pointed to me and said, we have a donated pool lift. And that was such a game changer for me in my life, to just talk about the breadth and the realm of equipment that comes in through our communities, to really help people be independent, work on so many aspects of life. So definitely excited to be here with y'all and glad to continue the conversation. So as Marty said, we need your feedback at the end of the webinar. We're going to have a survey. It'll take just a few moments, but we want to hear all the good stuff, anything that you want us to improve on, but definitely topics that we can help you with later on in the future. So definitely take a few moments and just give us that feedback. It's definitely helpful to all of us as we're building out this content for you. In today's session, as you know, we're focused on AT reuse revenue models. And so we know as our country moves toward recovery from COVID-19, it's useful to always re-examine everything that we're doing with our AT reuse programs, especially when it comes to financial stability. And so our time with you today, Carol and I are going to look at traditional support strategies used by state and territory AT reuse programs, and especially those that were impacted during and post-COVID. We'll be describing and talking a little bit about new strategies and how they've been analyzed, and really explore how staffing is key to sustainability and how programs can use outcomes data to promote sustainability. So, and thank you again to Trish for helping us interview programs and gather all this information so we can give y'all the good stuff and good resources. So we've got some learning objectives here. At the end of our session, you'll be able to list 3 principal sources of revenue for reuse programs. You'll be able to identify 3 ways the pandemic may have affected traditional financial support strategies. And lastly, you'll be able to suggest 2 new strategies for promoting sustainability of your program. And I'll toss this to Carolyn.
All right. So thank you so much, Liz. One of the big topics of conversation that we have been having since the early days of the Assistive Technology Act is it's all around sustainability and all around leveraging. That became even more relevant in 2004 with the reauthorization. And you see, this important conversation around, how do we make sure that our reuse efforts are not just going, but they're growing. So the big question here, and we appreciate everybody who spent time talking with us. Thank you, everybody. Big thanks to Clayton and a lot of ideas that we've gotten from Chris and from Denise and from Amanda and a bunch of other folks who are on with us. We really appreciate that. So where reuse programs get funds for operating expenses. And so we'll go to the next slide. And what we found is that really governmental sources of support for reuse are still a big thing here. Some, but not most, reuse programs are funded entirely from ATAC funds. There are still some that are out there that's the entire funding. So for example, Arizona, the exchange program doesn't have any external funding. And Clayton, I know I've been on the ground with you and seen your awesome project and program in action. And we've learned a lot from that. Most refurbishing programs, though, are operated by nonprofit organizations. There are reasons why when it comes to perhaps that structure, liability, all of that. So that partner with the state program and receiving varying amounts of funding. I know those of us within the university system, definitely having that nonprofit, that 501c3, where folks can donate funding plus technology really is helpful. I know in Texas, that's a big secret to the success there too, with Angela and her awesome partner, Kathy. And so, a few programs also receive some funding from state or local governments to support their services. We see that actually in some states where there's a line item or where even a governor has said, this is important because they might have a personal connection to assistive technology and know the importance of reuse. Also, local governments, sometimes it could come in the form of block grants, but some local governments actually see the importance of it and have it as a line item. So this also goes back to knowing how to navigate some of those systems and really look at diversification of your funding. And so moving to the next. So some of the ongoing activities that generate revenue that we have heard from y'all and actually we've done and seen in action, a lot of grants, whether it's the Christopher and Diana Reeves, is that right? The Reeves Foundation, I think that's the right name, and Woodruff Foundation, Coca-Cola, right, has supported folks. There's also a lot of other foundations out there and grants that a lot of you have gotten. Contracts for services, and we have seen these actually on the rise over the past few years. I remember back in 2004, 2005, there were not a lot of folks who had contracts, for example, with hospitals, but now we're starting to see that a lot of you do. I know in Texas, Kathy from Project Mend has very strong relationships with hospitals, and they've been in and out of contracts. I know here in Georgia at Friends of Disabled Adults and Children, that's been one of those consistent pathways to sustainability is having that contract with the hospital for folks who either don't have any health care or any insurance or what have you. Healthcare organizations is the other. This turned me on a while back. I remember Sarah Sack said in Kansas was talking about the healthcare organizations and some funding opportunities that are there. And so sure enough, that has been a great way to generate, revenue that actually, and also a way to help, fund your reuse efforts. And then of course, social service agencies. And we've seen a range of those, whether, it's the YMCA, whether it's, it could be also in kind, letting somebody use your space. I know in Utah, there was a nice bartering that happened a while back when it came to space. And we also saw that in other places like Montana. So special fundraising events, participatory events, sporting events. And Liz, I know you love sporting. Liz and I joke a lot because often we're using sports analogies and she's like, I hope that's positive. I don't know all about the sporting stuff, but we do know that walk, runs, and rolls have been successful. And then golf tournaments, even fishing tournaments to support reuse has been one of those things that's been very helpful. And then, of course, entertainment, those formal evenings, Halloween, harvest, Christmas, Hanukkah, any number of events, concerts, that's another thing. And then raffles. Raffles can be tough in some states, but do know that some folks have successfully done this. Once again, thinking about Texas and some of what they've been able to do. Angela, y'all continue to lead the way with a lot of these conversations. Fees for service is another area. We see that still, and Paraquad, for example, has done a really good job creating a model that worked and works when it comes to DME repairs, device cleaning. A lot of our independent living centers are doing that for a fee for service. I know we have independent living centers here in Georgia and South Carolina that's part of their sustainability and part of the way that they're generating, some revenue, which is great. And then, of course, applications for services. There are folks that are, charging a little bit for that. And we'll talk more about that too. And then thrift stores. That's something that I think a lot of us underestimated, and then we kind of watched. And sure enough, that has been something that has made a huge difference when it comes to generating operating revenue for reuse programs. And so a whole bunch more in thinking about that. We'll move to the next slide. So when we're talking about these contracts, some very tangible examples of that. There's Kansas, programs in Kansas, Oklahoma, and South Dakota that have really robust and transformational contracts with their state Medicaid agencies that provide devices for folks. We have tried this in some other states. I know, Denise, we have talked quite a bit about this in Maryland, for example, and in some other states. We haven't even been able to do it in Georgia, but we want to. But that is still something that's viable. And I think that, Liz and I, my dad used to say that I was painfully patient. Liz and I have been painfully patient, and we keep waiting for, some of our partners. We put the ideas out there and for them to turn to us and say, yes, that's a great idea. And so Medicaid reuse is still one of those. The reuse partners like Project Men and Friends of Disabled Adults and Children, they do have those contracts. And so the way that that's working is it's both picking up equipment that's no longer being used. So that, is a win for the hospital. And then it's also dropping off equipment so that folks can, get the equipment that they need whenever they're being discharged. Here in Atlanta, I'm not going to name the hospital, but there was a hospital that approached us at Tools for Life because they knew we were at Georgia Tech, and they, Liz, do you remember this? They asked us if we could get some students to come up with a way to lock the wheelchairs once they got out of a certain range, kind of like they did with grocery carts. And we were like, no, we're not going to do that, because I've seen those lines, you know, those barriers where the grocery carts are left. And we were like, we are not doing that with people with, you know, that need wheelchairs. How about if we actually get people wheelchairs rather than creating this other barrier? That's an invisible but also very physical barrier. And so sure enough, you know, Chris and the Friends of Disabled Adults and Children were able to successfully jump in on that conversation and pave the way to make this happen, which is great. And so very robust, long-term contract that continues to grow and keep going. Some of the programs that contract with other agencies or organizations to provide those devices, they partner, you know, perhaps with Centers for Independent Living. We've also seen some of y'all that are partnering with veterans organizations. I know when I was down in Puerto Rico, it was awesome to see what they were doing actually with the Paralyzed Veterans organization. And then, of course, agencies on aging. We are seeing this really kind of in a more regional approach. There are some statewide approaches, but we find that it's even more robust in the, you know, in a more regional approach. And then, of course, vocational rehabilitation. Some of y'all have done a really good job in partnering in those ways. And we'll move to the next slide. So some of the grants that are out there, you know, grants absolutely can be secured through open competition, you know, that competitive process, or the result of a solicitation of support from the program. These funds are usually committed for specific elements of the program or to a new initiative. And that's where it's really helpful that we're having this community of practice and these intentional conversations. Some of the grants that we have gotten for our reuse program have come directly from y'all. And it's because you did something in your state. You know, Barkley is trying something new and I'm going to try that here. Or, you know, just learning from each other so that we can actually have those new initiatives and, you know, be able to support specific elements of the program. So most grants are of a limited duration, and some relationships may provide for renewable ongoing support. And that's where it does take some time to really build, you know, that support. I know when I was in California, I was blown away by the good work that's going on out there, and the way that they have a network of folks who are continuously kind of moving the conversation forward, and that's those relationships. So with Anthem and AT&T, Molina Healthcare, the Department of Rehabilitation, right? Really growing all of that. And so just paying attention to what our partners are doing, but then also figuring out which ones can we grow, which ones are short-term, which ones can we leverage when it comes to contracts, grants, and all of those opportunities. The fees and services, that's another way. So the application fee, it's usually subject to a waiver if needed. I think pretty much everybody, that all of you that we spoke with said that, yep, there are times you have to waive that fee and that's okay. And there are other times, you know, where people can totally cover it. Sometimes people cover it even for other people, which is, you know, a nice thing. So the repair services, and Liz, I was going to give you a second if you want to talk about that, but the importance of reuse and repair. So.
Yes, I would be happy to. The repair services, these can sometimes be billable to insurance or Medicaid. I actually lived this just a few weeks ago, months ago, and thank goodness for FODAC here in Atlanta. But my chair just stopped working. I live with very techie people. They tried the best they could. My response was that it was going to be 45 days before I could get my chair fixed. And I was literally sitting in bed, and that's not okay. We're in the middle of a pandemic. I don't need to feel even more stuff than I already do. I have a full-time job. It's also just very painful to be laying in bed and very uncomfortable. And so again, just thank goodness for Fodak. They came to my rescue literally within a day, brand new motor, brand new wheels. And I've never been more agile in my chair, which is telling you something. They took time, effort, and care. So I think those DME repair services are obviously very instrumental. And it was a matter of me getting up in my chair within 24 hours versus 45 days, which is a big game changer. So definitely encourage y'all to look at that and just understand the importance of it for sure.
Liz and I were laughing because you were talking, I think that maybe the color is purple or something. It's a different color, but it doesn't matter.
That's what happens when you get reused. I mean, it's a brand new piece. So yeah, there is one tiny little part of my chair that's purple, but purple is my favorite color, and it works, and that's all that matters to me.
Yeah, right. So, you know, the importance of having those services and, you know, being billable, being able to bill those to insurance or Medicaid. A few of our reuse partners around the country actually are Medicaid providers. So that is also another thing to keep in mind. Computer repair services, that's still relevant. And we're finding that in some ways that's even come back more recently. So, and then cleaning fees for wheelchairs, as we said, there's some folks that actually have their hub scrubs that they've been taking out to the nursing homes or assisted living facilities, senior centers too, and just letting folks, especially during COVID, go ahead and sanitize all of that, get it clean, and make sure that everything is up and running. I know there was one of our partners out there who has teamed up with College of Engineering, and they have one of the clubs is actually an engineering club that's been doing this repairs and also cleaning of wheelchairs as a service, which is awesome. And we'll move to the next slide. And what we're finding is that if you give that opportunity, it's not even that everybody's going to show up for that golf tournament or show up for, you know, some of those bigger events. It's the opportunity for people to contribute. You know, a golf tournament, those still are once again relevant. And continue to, you know, grow. I think a lot of people have been isolated, and so they enjoy getting out there, even if it's in smaller groups for these golf tournaments. So, you know, revenue opportunities from fundraising events, they really do include that registration, or admission fees, corporate sponsorship fees. This gives a great opportunity for folks, corporations to sponsor different aspects of the event or teams or participants. The admissions fees to entertainment. There have been entertainers. We had this actually in Atlanta. There was a singer that was like, yeah, I'll sing for y'all, very well-known singer. And all the fees actually, the admission fees went to one of our programs, which is awesome. And then of course, raffles, prize drawings, all of that. So sell of event-related merch, right? That's also a good thing, merchandise. So those t-shirts and hats and all of that. Still, once again, a way that folks are getting their funding coming in. So fundraisers for reuse. I love this Toast of the Town. And so that's that evening event that Project Men in Texas has pulled together. There's the John Jam concert for the Real Project, which is super cool. That's another event that's out there. And once again, there's a screenshot here where you can see the different levels of sponsorship. It's that avenue of sponsorship. So 1,500 to 2,500 or 5,000, and you get these different levels of visibility to the sponsors. But really, it's once again that avenue for our partners in the community to be able to support and also create that win-win-win situation. And then those virtual events, it really is great how many folks, even if they couldn't physically go to the walk, run, and roll, or go to the Toast of the Town, or go to the John Jam concert, that they could still contribute, which is great. So, and that's what FODAC has been doing for 20 years. And sure enough, it was just as successful again this year, which is awesome. So, and we'll move to the next slide. So donors and general donations. This was one of those ideas that I remember back in 99. There were a couple of folks that came to visit our reuse project and from our ATAC community, and they were like, you know what we did is we just put a donation box out here and people just put money in there. And I was like, really? And sure enough, we put out a donation box and we sure enough had people start to donate. So having that avenue, whether it's on your website or it's a donation box, right? Allowing that kind of way for people to donate. Sometimes they want to do it anonymously, or they just, they don't want the fanfare. They just want to, contribute. So having those long-term friends and supporters of the program is extremely important. We find that time of year makes a difference here. So towards the end of last year, so in 2020, there were a lot of folks that, were going ahead and donating because they wanted the tax, the credit for being able to do that donation. So we really do believe that all programs should foster support from the general public, right? Diversification. So through promotion of the mission, participation in events, and really making it easy for folks to be able to contribute on an ongoing, everyday 24/7 basis. So, and we'll move to the next slide. So contributions in kind. We actually have seen this going up recently within the reuse community, and a lot of you shared that with us. During COVID, there were folks that had time on their hands and they wanted to actually do something that they could do from home. So a lot of folks had their websites redesigned and got some support around that. There are also folks who are doing transportation services as an in-kind, the repair services. Want to make sure you have somebody that's certified doing that. Parts donations, and so asking, for example, and this is a great idea, and it's true from Trish, that asking a hospital for those AA and AAA batteries because they're only allowed to use them once during, for example, a sleep study, and then they have to get rid of those. But there's nothing really wrong with those batteries. So, just figuring out where can you get those in-kind donations that will help in the long run. Legal and marketing services. We're finding actually a lot of folks are getting the pro bono work for legal. Actually, we're working right now with a group who's doing that around one of our services, which is great. And then marketing services. A lot of folks have been, once again, had time on their hands and were able to donate some of those marketing services and creative services. And then, of course, labor from volunteers for cleaning, repair, all of those things, assistance with fundraising events. There are some folks that love doing that. And so just getting them on board and letting them go to town, which is great. And so we can move to the next slide. So, Liz, would you like to jump in on this?
Yes, I would be happy to. So the next few slides are just going to shed more light on how the COVID-19 pandemic affected sources of revenue. And so the COVID impact on revenue, obviously there were a lot of negative impacts. A lot of us didn't know what was going on. This was a very new process for all of us. So there were definitely limitations on public gatherings that resulted in cancellation of major fundraising events. So for example, FODAC moving to virtual was a very smart idea, but typically, obviously, that would be a very much in-person event with almost like a festival going on, generating a lot of money. There were closure of reuse facilities that affected fees for service. So again, not many programs were able to stay open? What did that really look like for customers coming in, needing services done? And so again, that was definitely affected. Definite overall impacts on AT services, including demonstration, loan, and reuse. And so there were just a lot of conversations about how do we get equipment into the hands of folks that need it for demonstration? What does that look like? Sanitizing, shipping equipment, loaning equipment out, making sure we're getting it back, sanitizing it when it comes back in through the doors as well too. And then just overall that lessened broad public contact. Again, we're just all just trying to, move forward the best way we know how, keeping social distancing, keeping everyone safe as well too. So, and there's just a sign over here on the right that says, we're sorry this event was canceled. So the silver lining for reuse, which we're always trying to look for that silver lining, right? When we get bricks thrown our way, what can we do to kind of build that wall back up, if you will? So the pandemic circumstances brought positive attention to the benefits of AT reuse. And so I remember in the beginning when we were talking about sanitization, even just personally as somebody who uses a power wheelchair, making sure that my joystick was clean all the time, making sure that any attendant switches that are on my chair that my caregivers would put their hands on were constantly always clean. And so the importance of sanitization is now truly widely understood and very much appreciated, and probably even more of a routine than it was before. And so even more so than that, we have encountered persistent issues that identified looking at interest, legislative interest as well too. We, had many conversations and had many people reaching out to us for more information on getting access to technology. But once you have access to the technology, what about Wi-Fi connections as well too? What did that really look like for, the kiddos that weren't in school, that were learning virtually? But again, for so many people with disabilities in the community, relying on that pretty much every day in general, but then you've got the pandemic, which is affecting everyone. And so what did that really look like for folks with disabilities? And so again, just silver linings that are really bringing up new conversations and new thoughts to the forefront that can benefit everyone, but especially folks with disabilities. And so how can we use these circumstances to promote and sustain AT reuse? So again, the pandemic isolation saw items not being reused widely that play important roles in communication and mental health. So things like computers, cell phones, iPads, iPhones, any type of smartphone, if you will. Alaska, Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, North Dakota, and Ohio contributed anecdotes about filling the gap for some customers. And basically the biggest question is how can we establish more effective reuse in all of those categories? These are the devices that folks use every day for communication and absolutely play important roles in everyday living. AT reuse is now on the radar at the CDC. Carol and I have been doing a lot of close work with the CDC over the past year and a half. And so even through our work of just raising awareness on accessible materials, the idea and the notion of AT reuse, it has come up so many times. It's so interesting how so many of these things go hand in hand, especially for serving folks with disabilities. And so we're very appreciative that we can keep this conversation going and that it is on the radar of a big entity like the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. We also know that Centers for Independent Living, CILS, and AAA's, Areas Agency on Aging, are engaging in more conversations about reuse, which is really awesome. So how do we capitalize on this intersection of interest with more AT partnerships, right? We've hosted back in the day, Pass It On Center and Center for Independent Living Reuse collaborative conferences as well. And then we have very healthy conversations with our aging partners across the state and the country as well too. But how can we really get them more involved in AT reuse partnerships, in AT partnerships in general as well too? So some really great models already happening across the country, but we would love to see that dive even deeper. More agencies are focused on increased efficiency. We had to do that, right? With COVID anyway, we had to be very smart when it comes to people donating equipment more so than in general. I mean, germs are yucky and very proud of our programs anyway, but really looking at the virus transmission. Some of the webinars that we did for AT3 before talked about ventilation in the room, right? Opening windows, things like that. So just a lot of conversations that we wouldn't typically have anyway. And so that efficiency is so very important. Will the exposure of the widespread need for AT for education overcome past reluctance to share unused devices? Many of you know that we've, especially in Georgia, but across even in the New England area, we really looked at the model there of AT school swap, right? Looking at what it would look like to work with the departments of education across the country on reusing AT, that exchange network, if you will. And so we're still keeping our eye on that and just really looking at how we can even enhance that now more so than ever. In Georgia here at Tools for Life, we're collaborating strongly with Georgia's Department of Education to launch EdTrade for AT reuse in Georgia public schools. And we just started this academic year. So we're excited to see how this flourishes and how it unrolls, and we'll definitely keep all of you updated with that. With renewed emphasis on education and training, we see some AT partnerships with vocational rehabilitation transition programs. For example, Virginia and Minnesota reported AT involvement in facilitating the completion of transition programs. In Georgia, we are now assisting a different aspect of VR career transitions as well too. And so again, just very important to kind of look at how we can expand our work by just reaching out to other partners in the state and just moving forward with a lot of that. So again, a lot of good things happening in Georgia, but we encourage you all to reach out to any of these states that we've mentioned just to see how their programs are progressing and moving forward.
All right, thank you so much. And very excited about the EdTrade. Gina has done such a great job. And so everybody stay tuned, because this is one that, we thought, exchange within the school system probably isn't that relevant anymore, but we have found that it's already being widely accepted, and there's a lot of positive energy around this. So looking forward to sharing that with all of you as we move forward. So some of the strategies to promote financial sustainability that we want to share with you as we're thinking about this, we want to think about how to evaluate the possibilities, learn from other folks. One of the questions, and I was listening to the questions just a moment ago, is somebody that's doing billable repairs willing to share their contact and details for questions about that process. Caitlin, we are totally happy to help with that. And once again, that's one of those things that if I was looking at this and looking at how can I expand, that's one of the areas I probably would expand in. And happy to talk with you about that. No problem, Caitlin. What are some categories? We found during COVID that actually a lot of the things that we had kind of all collectively stopped doing as much resurfaced. People did need computers. They did not necessarily have what they need when it comes to tablets, and some of that ease of use, if you will. Cell phones actually still really relevant. And part of that is because with the new generations of phones, there are apps and there are features that are game changers for our folks within the disability community. Environmental controls now that you can hook up to a Wi-Fi system and use an app on a phone, and sure enough, it makes a big difference. So cell phones are relevant again when it comes to reuse. Hearing aids, for increased need over 65, but we're definitely seeing that people are still needing those. And then, of course, things like CPAP devices to help address the growing shortage. And this is something that needs to be on everybody's radar. One is the chip shortage. That's part of why computers and tablets and cell phones are in such high demand through the reuse programs. Getting new devices has been very complex. our program, we ordered new computers back in June. They're like, hey, they'll be there sometime in, I don't know, October. We're like, no, we need them now. But, and we're not the only ones that are experiencing that. And who knows, we'll see what happens in October. But CPAPs, there's a growing shortage of new and replacement devices, and it's caused by the massive Philips Respironics recall. And so once again, keeping that kind of information on our radar is extremely important. Something else when we're thinking about evaluating possibilities, more interagency partnerships. Is that where you need to go and grow with your independent living centers, the AAAs, vocational rehabilitation, Department of Education. We were not expecting Department of Education to step up the way they have and it was specifically with the ed trade around reuse. Aging services, contributing to the sustainability and stability. And so once again, sharing what's working and how to navigate some of that. And it's been invaluable from our community here. And we'll move to the next slide. So planning for financial sustainability is that whole thing. I think it was Benjamin Franklin that says, if you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail. And so we definitely want to plan for sustainability, not plan to fail. And so having that plan, so diversifying those sources, you've heard Liz say it and I've said it and Trish has said it, for years. So thinking about a good healthy mix of contracts, grants, fees, fundraising, donations, mix the sizes of the income streams for sustainability and for stability, and try to keep those ongoing sources. It's very interesting, Angela, I totally agree. Same here. Angela said, if you're ever in San Antonio, go visit Project Mend. I visit them every time I'm in San Antonio, which I'm there pretty often, or I was before COVID. And same offer here. And if you're ever through Atlanta after COVID, please come visit us. And would love to show you, because I think just sometimes seeing, how folks have grown can make a big difference. But the way that Kathy has been able to grow her program, really by being in the right place, having the conversations with people, not this big push, but more, when the opportunity comes. What do you need? And she says a new building, and they get a new building. And that's pretty amazing, right? So thinking about, how people, it's seizing the opportunity when it shows up. So shoot for overlapping terms of commitment so that you actually are having ongoing streams. So when one ends, that, they're not all ending at the same time, and really plan carefully before launching the new initiatives. Do that environmental scan. Talk to those of us who have, started different initiatives. There are times that I have talked with some of you when we were thinking about some big idea, and then we were like, nope, we're not going to do it. And it's because you helped us, do our research and not make a mistake. Or be able to know what the true risks are before we enter into something. So also doing that contingency planning when you're preparing a budget. It's that whole thing of what if, it's that game. So what if you had a revenue shortfall, 5, 10, 15, 20%? Honestly, what if you had, unexpected increase 5, 10, 15, 20%. That's happened to a lot of folks this year, both ways. So which services would you give a priority for preservation? Going ahead and playing that kind of out, that what if game in your mind, but also maybe walking your board through and your team through this. What are your fixed costs? How much does it really cost? When you're looking at, bare bones, but then also what does it look like when you're really thriving? Which expenses could you reduce to offset various costs if you had to? So just thinking about all of that, planning ahead, and being patient. And Denise, thank you so much. You're absolutely right. It is awesome, Dana, Reeves, Christopher and Dana Reeves. Thank you for looking out for me, as you always do. We'll move to the next slide. So grants, a lot of you have written grants, you know, Jesse, Wright, a lot of other folks out there, you know, Amy, a bunch of y'all, Angela. Writing grants is a big part of what we do, but not everybody has written a grant necessarily for just reuse or what have you. The great thing about our community is that a lot of you have been able to, and we are happy to do this too, share some of the grants that have been successfully awarded. And it may not be that you'll be able to get it from that specific funding source, but you could see, you know, gosh, how was that written? How was that story told? And so happy to share. So identify one or more projects your program wants to undertake or improve or expand. And that's a lot of times what people definitely want to invest in. Write the description and plan for implementation. So you got to prepare that budget, you know, obviously. Explore foundations that fund those projects. There are times that I have learned about specific funding sources directly from y'all. And so thinking about that and watch for those grant announcements. Some of the, you know, resources that are out there. So as you're planning ahead, Cause IQ, that's a directory of nonprofits by city and state. Very, very helpful resource when you're thinking about how do you get those grants. And then, you know, support from grants management software. There's, you know, PeopleSoft. There's a bunch of different ones out there. eCivis is another one. Some of the government grants, they're so much easier to find now, and I have a bunch that I subscribe to, but this one especially, you know, there's the grants.gov so that I can get that update and see if anything is in alignment with what we want, or that I could stretch that. And then of course GuideStar, and you can check out the status of nonprofits and all of that and just get information, and also check your own you know, partners out or not other nonprofits that are in your area. It's great information and you can have it right there at your fingertip. And we'll move to the next slide. So what grantors want in a proposal? And what I often find, I was actually talking to my son about this the other night, is answer the question that's asked. That's how simple sometimes it is just answer the question that's asked. And so having that very clear mission, that clear funding request, you know, and making it as simple as possible, but also as dynamic as possible. The work we do changes people's lives. It is worth funding. It is worth funding. There are literally, with all of you on this webinar, there are hundreds of thousands of stories and lives that we have changed collectively. It's powerful. So thinking about that, remember the project description that you created, pull it out, fine tune it. I often have these in my back pocket, if you will. I have them on my computer, really, but I have them at easy access. Show how you're collaborating with other organizations. People love to see that, and it's true, and that's something that we all do very well, which is important. So include inspiring anecdotes. We know you have them, and we all have them, and that's one of the beautiful things about the work we do. Measure the impacts of your activities. I often include like a little simple logic model where I'm talking about outputs, outcomes, how am I going to measure success, long-term, short-term, mid-term, and happy to share that with folks. Compute that return on investment. Sarah Sack, Beth Minio, both came up with various tools and ways to look at return on investment. Trish has a whole other return on investment formula. Our friends in Virginia, Barclay, has another return on investment tool. So share some of that and learn from what a lot of us have created, which is good. Describe a creative solution for expanding or improving your program. You can run that by some of us. I'm happy to look at that and explore that with you. And then really think about sustainability and explain your sustainability strategy. present it with a realistic budget that aligns with the project goals. Project Men has said that the value of the building, of building that board that's engaged, that contributes to the program and participates in securing that grant funding is invaluable. So take a board member with you. And that's what a lot of our programs do when you're going to go meet that grant, potential grant contact. So, and we'll move to the next slide. So when you are evaluating other revenue opportunities, thinking about, could you generate small, steady streams of income? Sometimes that's helpful when you're just thinking about the fees, just having that consistent stream. And do you have the resources and supporters to establish a thrift store? There are some folks who are operating thrift stores that are getting anywhere between $5,000 and $30,000 a month. That they're clearing from those. And it really is incredibly helpful when you're thinking about funding the reuse programs. Could you partner with another program or another program that runs a thrift store? Could you share a thrift shop with another community support group or domestic violence shelter? There are a lot of potential partners out there. So know your community and have those conversations, that intentional dialogue. And we'll move to the next slide. So plan to go virtual for fundraising events. A lot of folks, especially those of us in the South, but I think it's all over the country. I think we are all like, woohoo, we're almost done with COVID, but no. And so having that virtual fundraising event really can bring a lot of light to a lot of folks, but also keep things moving and grooving. So social distancing does make those traditional fundraising events impossible, extremely difficult. But some events have transitioned to that virtual mode. Supporters, they do understand. And in some ways they're giving even more because of that. So plan a virtual version of the event. That's really a great way for a contingency. And it's just a smart approach. And so we'll move to the next slide. All right, Liz, you got this?
I sure do.
All
so
right.
Section, I know we've got just a few moments here, so I'm going to zip through this, but this is all about how staffing contributes to sustainability. And so we obviously know that continuity of operations expertise, it requires planning for roles and contingency situations. And so we'll need to be able to perform activities at home or an alternate location. That definitely was true for folks having to go remotely. And so really what we're looking at what that looks like for AT reuse programs. The pandemic isn't the only emergency that will benefit from your preparation. I think we all know that in this community. There are vast emergencies that happen that affect the folks that we're working with. And so we could definitely learn from this pandemic, but how that can help us in other emergencies as well too. Are you equipped for office functions at home? Do staff have cell phones, computers? Are they able to really translate that by working off site? Refurbishing in the garage or the basement. Remember, a number of the reuse programs in this country started in someone's garage. We absolutely know that. Very much started as small programs and just grew over time. We know In-Data staff was refurbishing some computers at home during the pandemic. We know that they really looked at what the home environment looked like, making sure that each of the staff had the appropriate tools and pieces of equipment as well too. And then obviously we know this, we do this so much in Georgia, and we know all of you focus on this as well too, but just want to emphasize cross-training staff to cover those who can't be available. As somebody who does our training and education, I can't tell you how important it is that our team is cross-trained for so many different activities. So that way, when there are emergencies, we can all step up and help out in various ways. Plan to stay operational remotely. During this time, Easter Seals Iowa moved to use only electronic signatures to minimize the need for physical contact and to expedite the application process. I think that is so smart and awesome, and something that should probably be continued when the pandemic is over and we kind of go back to quote unquote normal times, if you will. All team members already have the capability to work remotely with office phones rolling over to mobile phones. So again, just definitely a good example of continuity of operation planning for emergencies. Good workers add knowledge of community and customers. We know that the knowledgeable staff, well-trained workers are second only to financial stability for program sustainability, right? If your program is up and running and shiny and your staff knows what they're doing and you've got these methods down and your processes down, that's really going to help to even bring in some more financial sustainability and help with overall program sustainability as well. So frequent turnover undermines stability in customer service. So we as leaders in the AT reuse programs, the ones that run it, really need to take a look at this and how we can keep our staff, with us and making sure that they don't leave and that we don't have frequent turnover. Careful recruitment of employees with the correct skill set for the job enhances sustainability. We know that over the years, we've had many conversations with programs about, are you looking for individuals coming in with certain certifications? Is it just a knowledge, of AT or AT reuse? And so again, just making sure that you are doing careful recruitment and that you are looking for folks with skill sets or those that are easily trained and that can build up those skill sets very quickly and very easily. And so then we have lessons learned. We're always learning lessons and trying to grow from them as well. Many programs have faced the greatest trial of sustainability during this pandemic. And as Carolyn said a few moments ago, it isn't over. We thought it was, but it definitely isn't over. We've benefited from challenges by exploring capabilities of program staff and resources to be deployed in different ways to continue to serve. I'm so proud of just our community banding together. I've seen so much activity on the AT3 reuse and just AT3 in general listservs. Just a lot of questions coming through of how folks can, continue this during this major emergency as well too. And so a lot of folks have stepped up, and we really appreciate folks sharing resources and just sharing ideas of how it can happen. And then, of course, we've identified new needs and new possibilities, and we're better positioned to serve. We are very versatile, and we've been working with emergencies over the years as well, too. And so while this is a new one, we've definitely been able to implement what we've learned over the years and hoping that we can kind of build this up and take it even further as well, too. So I'm definitely proud of all of the great work all of you are doing in our community. So we are here for you. We want to know if you have any questions, comments, suggestions. What is it that we can answer for you here as we're wrapping up this little bit?
And I was listening once again to some of the chat, and Liz, it looks like that folks are very interested in learning more about billable hours and repair fees and all of that. And Marty, we can definitely talk about that. We probably have enough content to make that more of another webinar or something like that. We can definitely talk about that, however you want to handle that. But there's important information about even how you would handle the different aspects of that and gearing up, for all of that. And then another comment that had to do with you were interested in learning more about our ed trade. And we are happy to share. We have learned a whole bunch over the years and have applied it all, and definitely would love to share that, because I think that's another one of those areas that folks could benefit from. And Jules, I think you're absolutely right that these virtual events are definitely here to stay for quite a while. And I think you're right about let's keep planning that way. So I'm with you. So here are some of the resources. Obviously, at3center.net. We love working with the AT3 Center, and it's full of information. And then, of course, our Georgia Tech Accessible Materials microsite for the COVID-19 information that Liz was brilliant and pulled together, which is great. And that's at cidi.georgiatech.edu/COVID/. And then, of course, the GuideStar that we spoke about, checking out the profiles of nonprofit finders. And that's GuideStar, GuideStar.org. Did I get it right, Liz? I hope I did. Good.
So we've got the survey link we mentioned earlier. please take a few moments to fill it out. It won't take you long at all, but we do want to hear what worked, what didn't work, and just again, any topics that you want to hear from us in the future, please include it here because we're actively working on building content and we would love to just bring information to you that you want to hear about. So here's the link and please take a few moments to fill it out.
We sure do appreciate y'all paying attention and tuning in today. If you have any questions for us, let us know. And like Liz said, please do leave those ideas and let us know what you learned. We do hope this was very helpful. We love doing this work with y'all. So, Marty?
You know, the only thing I'd add, Carolyn, is, yeah, I think that there's definitely some content there, I think, for future webinars, I think both on on some of those opportunities and also on, you know, on programs like the new relationship with the education department in Georgia. So yeah, definitely everybody, please do complete the surveys. And thank you so much, Carolyn and Liz, and also for pointing out all the incredible work that the AT programs are doing with reuse, and especially throughout the pandemic. So I don't see any other questions. So with that, we'll go ahead and close the webinar and just want to wish everybody to have a great afternoon. Bye, y'all.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.